somebody came up to Gregg one time and said, you look just like Gregg Allman. And Gregg's response, without even thinking about it, was, how convenient. Hey, this is Warren Haynes, and this is On the Record with Ultimate Guitar.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's quite an honor. We are here to chat about your new record, Million Voices Whisper. This is a really cool record. I've had a chance to listen to it a bit over the past couple days. There's a lot to be proud of on this record. Is there a song that you're most proud of on this record?
It's hard for me to pick one. I guess from a guitar standpoint, I really like the stuff that Derek Trucks and I did together, because we were face to face in the studio doing what we've done so many times on stage. So the song These Changes, which he and I wrote together, at the end we have this kind of cool call and response thing going on that really reflects the hundreds and hundreds of times we played together.
Yeah, and this was the first time, unless I'm wrong, that you guys have worked together since your time in the Allman Brothers. So what was it like working with him outside the context of that band?
Well, it was really fun. It was great reuniting for this occasion. He and I have done so many things together. I've been on several Derek Trucks records, and he's been on Gov't Mule records. We toured together. Even before the two of us were in the Allman Brothers together, we had played dozens and dozens of times on stage. But we haven't really collaborated like this since the Allman Brothers stopped playing. And so it was really nice to get back into the studio, and we wrote some songs together, and spent 3 days writing, 2 days recording. It was really a great time.
One song that really stuck out was Real Real Love, which has quite a story behind it. Would you mind taking us through that song, and what was that process like for you? I'd imagine it was pretty special.
I guess I don't really know how far it goes back. Gregg Allman had started writing that song, and somewhere along the line he had showed it to me, but it was at a time when I was spending time at his house and we were writing music together, but we never did write that song. He showed me where he had started it. And then after he passed, I found the lyric. As far as I know, there was no music. There was no demo or any recording or anything. And the lyric was incomplete. So I finished the lyric and added music to it. This going back a couple of years, I called Derek on the phone and told him about the song, and that I thought he and I should record it together. Derek has a great studio in Florida, so initially we were going to do it there and just use that as an excuse to go record half an album or something, and that was kind of the inspiration for it. But as the time came and I started putting this record together, as fate would have it, Derek's studio was under construction. So we weren't able to use his studio. So after we spent 3 days writing songs together, he came into the studio in Connecticut where we recorded the new record. And we were able to record it with us together in the same room, which was really important to me because, you can make great music remotely these days, but I still prefer looking at each other while we're playing and singing. And so the approach we kind of took on Real Real Love was, for me, I just played rhythm guitar and sang, and it was like a call and response between my voice and Derek's guitar, kind of similar to the way Gregg Allman and Duane Allman took that approach on Please Call Home, the Allman Brothers song from way, way back. And it was beautiful, being in the studio, being able to capture it that way. was really fantastic. And so he plays a great solo in the middle, and then this beautiful outro where I'm singing and he's answering, and it just really came together in a way that I'm really happy with, and I think Gregg's spirit was ever present.
I would imagine that gave it a bit of extra weight. Did you feel that when you were writing that song?
Writing it, recording it, mixing it, every aspect, doing the vocal. He loomed large. It was the first time that I've ever written a song with the intent of honoring somebody else's style to that extent, because he and I wrote so much music together through the years. We played together so many times that I felt like I could just go a little further in trying to honor the way he would have done it, all the way down to the way I sang it, and of course, I've known Gregg since 1981, played together from 1989 until he passed. And I just thought it was really important to honor his spirit as much as possible for that song.
It is a really beautiful song, and I appreciate you bringing it to life and allowing us to hear it. Do you have a fondest memory of Gregg?
His sense of humor, I think about a lot. He was funnier than people realize. And he and myself and Alan Woody used to share a tour bus together when we were touring in the early days of my experience with the Allman Brothers. And there was just a lot of comedy, a lot of laughing. Somebody came up to Gregg one time and said, you look just like Gregg Allman. And Gregg's response, without even thinking about it, was, how convenient.
Oh, that's great. So we're big guitar nerds, obviously, at Ultimate Guitar. So what, as I understand it, you kind of relied on the same instruments that you typically rely on, your Gibsons, the Les Paul and the 335. Is that correct?
Yeah, I played mostly my signature model Les Paul and my custom shop 335 for this record. I didn't take nearly as many guitars into the studio this time as I did on the previous two records where I used tons of vintage stuff. I still used some vintage amps and stuff. Jay Mascis gave me one of his signature model guitars when I sat in with Dinosaur Jr., and I used it on a song that's on the deluxe edition on the bonus CD, and it sounded fantastic. Amp-wise, I usually used 3 amps combined, which is what I've been doing recently. I think I used my Alessandro recording amp and a new prototype Gibson amp that I've been working with Gibson on, and my Homestead combo. I think those 3 things combined, and I could lean on whichever one of them seemed to have more of the tone that I was looking for at any given moment. But most of the time, they wound up just being like a almost equal blend. We found a nice blend of those 3 amps that seemed to translate to all the different sounds.
So you mentioned a prototype Gibson amp. Is that something that might see a production run at some point?
Yeah, it's being worked on right now, and I'm hoping it's coming very soon.
Very much looking forward to that. What's it? Can you give us some specifics of what it's based on, or what you're trying to achieve with this new amp?
Well, I've been talking to them a lot recently about bringing back the old Gibson amps, like the Skylark, which I really love and have recorded with a lot in the past. Also, the Falcon. So we're working on amps based on each of those. They can't use the name Skylark because I think someone else owns it, but it's one of the amps is going to be similar to that, but a little more versatile. It'll have reverb, I think a tone control as opposed to just volume, because the original Skylark was only volume, which I love. I love that, but we were able to work with it in a way that the Les Paul still sounds good in that amp, because the problem I had, it's not a problem because it's one of my favorite amps, but I had an issue with plugging a Les Paul into a Skylark because it had too much bottom end and it would kind of get a little mushy. So a Skylark was better for a Firebird or a Tele or a Strat or a Dan Electro, anything a little more pointed. Les Paul was too much for the Skylark. But the one we're working on now, they were able to redesign it in a way where the Les Paul sounds fantastic through it. So I'm really excited about that.
At one point in your career, I think I've seen you playing a Strat, and at some point you switched to the Gibson stuff, whether it's a Les Paul or a 335. What prompted that switch, and what do you love about Les Pauls specifically?
Well, I've been a Gibson guy all my life. My first three decent guitars were SGs. I didn't get a Les Paul till, somewhere in the 80s. I think I got my first Les Paul in the early 80s. I just always loved that sound. I got a Strat in the mid to late 80s that I really liked a lot and played it for a while. At that point, I was just kind of looking for something different, and this particular Strat I liked a whole lot, but it got stolen, and I never replaced it. I've got a few other Strats that I like, but none that ever really took the place of that one. But also when I joined the Allman Brothers in '89, I was still playing that Strat a little bit, and it was cool to kind of express myself a little differently on certain songs. But the Allman Brothers is more of a Gibson sound too, so that just reinforced my what I thought all along, which was that the Gibsons were more my voice. That I was always looking for a sound that kind of matched my singing voice. And when I think of people like B.B. King and Bonnie Raitt, and you hear their guitar and you hear their vocal, it sounds like the same person. And I guess several decades ago, realized that a Les Paul gave me that more than any other guitar. But I still love playing the 335s and the Firebirds, and and experimenting with other voices as well. But that's just kind of my go-to.
So when you're experimenting with other voices, have you drifted much into the land of digital amps, these amp modelers and that sort of thing? You're kind of the oracle of tone for a lot of us, right? So I'm curious if you've ever tried those or what you think of them.
Well, I can't really speak to that because I tried it years ago and it just didn't work for me. I'm sure they've gotten better and better and better. And a lot of people are using them. I haven't tried the most recent ones, but the last time I tried, when I A-B'd it with a real amp, it just was not as good. I owe it to myself to try some of the newer ones. I can't imagine that I'm going to gravitate toward that because I'm just very old school about my sound. I've never been one that likes the sound of guitar in the monitors. When I go into the studio, it always takes me a couple of days to adapt to headphones because I'm just used to hearing it out in the air. But I would be open to trying anything, especially in the studio. But it's also fun to capture an amp sound.
Yeah. So, did you experiment with any pedals in the studio this time around? I know you've got a couple that you like to use.
Yeah, the stuff that I go to the most, probably 80% of my sounds are just straight in guitar and amp. But I'm always running through my Bradshaw switching system, and in that choice of effects is there's a Klon Centaur. There's a two-speed tremolo. There's a Hughes and Kettner Rotosphere, which is a Leslie simulator. There's an old Boss Octaver and a couple of different delays that I experiment with here and there. What else? There's a discombobulator that I've been using, which is an envelope filter. But I also am thinking about going back to the old school Neutron envelope filter, which I have an old one that I might pull out and start using again. But not a lot of choices. I also have what's called a Texas Ranger, which is Cesar Diaz made it years ago. It's based on the top boost of an AC30, but he put it into a pedal and built it in a way where you could choose high, mid, or low to boost. And I find that when I boost the low, it kind of gives you that sound that Hendrix would use sometimes on a Strat to get the kind of sound. It just instantly boosts those frequencies, which is nice if I'm looking for that. I guess that's about it. I have a signature wah-wah that I use. For me, it's really important to start with just getting the sound with the guitar and the amp, and everything else to me is like a variation, another voice. And but I'm not one of those people that uses pedals to get the initial sound. They just become colors and effects for me.
Now you're a Klon user, as you mentioned, and I've talked to quite a few very proud Klon users. Do you feel that the Klon is worth the price tag that they put on it, and what does it lend to your sound?
I don't think anything's worth the price they put on it these days, but it's a great pedal, and I've got a couple of them. I've got a silver one and a gold one, and when he first started building those, I remember I was playing with Gov't Mule at a club in Boston called Mama Ken's, which was Aerosmith's club. And he came by our sound check and gave me one, and I really liked it a lot. He had been working, I think he said, for about a year and a half on a way to get it to boost your sound without changing it, which is what Stevie Ray Vaughan used to use the tube screamer for. One of his tube screamers was just to get on top of the band, but not have your tone change. And the Klon did that even better, to the extent that you couldn't detect any difference in the tone if you set it that way. But then at some point I was like, I'm wasting this pedal. It's such a great pedal. So the way I've been setting it now is where it's a little warmer and a little gainier. And it's great. I use it quite a bit. I should probably take the other one out and have both of them, have one just do the old school boost and one be the tonal change.
So there is a rumor online that at one point you used a Boss Metal Zone. Is that true? Did you ever use a Boss Metal Zone pedal, or a Hyper Metal, I think was another name for it?
I may have used one once or somewhere in passing when that was available and tweaked it to get a cool sound, but I don't recall using it for any lengthy period of time. I'm not the best pedal person in the world. There's so much great stuff out there that I don't even know about, because I get kind of tucked into my world and happy with what I have, but I should experiment more. I guess I just, when I did that pedal show with those guys in Britain, they had so many amazing pedals. And I was like, man, I would love to have a week to just spend checking all these things out, but I don't find myself doing that as much as I probably should. It's fun when you do.
Are there any strange pedals or any strange gear that you've used in the studio that people might be surprised by?
I'll try anything. If you're in the studio and we're looking for something crazy, if somebody has a suggestion, I'll always give it a whirl. I also have a Zen Drive, which is not crazy. It's a great pedal. I've used some of the Analog Man stuff, which is really great. And I have a copy of a Fuzz Face, and it's so radical sounding that it's not something that I would want to use all the time. But when you want that sound, it's really cool. I don't know how similar it is to the original ones. And I have a ton of pedals that I should just dust off and remind myself what they all do, because I've just never been a big pedal person, but whenever I go down that road, it's fun, and it always inspires you to do something different. Because whenever you have a different sound, it inspires you to play differently.
So you kind of mentioned the difference between certain guitars when you were talking about the Strat. What do you look for in a Les Paul? Is it the weight? Is it the feel of the neck? When you pick up a guitar, what sort of things are you looking for?
Well, I like the kind of 59 neck, which is kind of fat but not baseball bat fat. I like the way the big necks sound better, but not to the extent that if it's cumbersome to play, then you're kind of defeating the purpose. On the 59 kind of neck, for me, that's kind of the best of both worlds because it's big enough but not too big. I like the lighter ones in general. A lot of times the lighter ones tend to sound better. And of course, anytime you can get that extra weight off your neck, it's good. I've been playing Les Pauls for so long that I'm used to it, but it's a little nutty. I think when you pick one up and listen to it before you plug it in, you can kind of get the character of the guitar. If the guitar sounds good acoustically, then you can make it good electrically. Maybe you don't have the right pickups in it or whatever, but when you pick up a special guitar of any sort, especially a Les Paul, you can hear there's something about the resonance and the fullness of it acoustically that gives you the indication that it's a great guitar.
So you came up through the 80s, obviously, and we saw a lot of different trends kind of go through the 80s when it comes to guitar playing. I wanted to get your thoughts on some of the more shreddy players, the guys like Eddie Van Halen or Yngwie. What were your thoughts on kind of shred guitar?
Let's start with Eddie Van Halen. I wrote a thing after he passed that was posted online that kind of shared my thoughts about him, who I never met. I did see him play twice, once in the early 80s and once at a private show at the LA Forum when they got back together with David Lee Roth, and they were doing a private show for about 700 people or something. It was like a rehearsal before the show, before the tour started. And he was great both times I saw him. If we go back to the history of me hearing Van Halen, by the time I heard the first Van Halen record, I had already kind of decided what type of guitar player I was. I had already kind of developed a style enough to know that I wasn't going to incorporate new techniques to that extent into what I did. I was comfortable with the direction that I had chosen, and people were raving about Eddie and what he had created. And in the beginning, I didn't want to believe it was as good as it was. I would listen to him and go, "Wow, that's fantastic!" But he's using a lot of distortion. Maybe he's just kind of like covering up some of it. Anything to convince yourself that he couldn't possibly be that good. And then eventually, when I heard the thing that he did on acoustic guitar, I was like, "Oh my God, he can do that on acoustic. That's fantastic!" He was amazing. I never did consider him an influence because, like I say, at that point, I had kind of already chosen my direction, and I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. But I love those first few records a lot. I didn't listen to it. Mostly just hearing it on the radio. I don't recall owning any of those records, but every time I heard it, it was just like he changed music in the same way that Hendrix changed music. All the young guitar players from that point forward were using him as a springboard, and which is both good and bad, because all of a sudden we got inundated with terrible clones of Eddie Van Halen, But that's what happens with anybody who's innovative like that, And so in some ways, what he gave to the music world also opened the doors for a lot of mediocrity. But he changed everything, you know. And of course, I love Steve Vai's playing. There are people that are serious chops players, like Steve Morse was fantastic, and Steve and I are buddies, and Steve Vai and I are friends. It's never something I wanted to pursue for myself, but I'm envious of people that can play like that, you know. And Jimmy Herring, who's one of my best friends and who I've played with many times, it's got those kind of chops, and it's just kind of pisses you off a little bit, you know. But we make our choices early on, the kind of players we want to be. And I never gravitated toward that sort of playing, but the players that can do it with soul and with feeling and create something new and special, it's fantastic.
Soulful is the first word that comes to mind when I think about your playing. I was listening to the song "Old Friend" this morning. It came on in a playlist, and I was like, man, that's so emotional, so much soul in there. Can you kind of walk us through that song, how that song came to be?
My friend Chris Anderson, who used to be the guitar player in the Outlaws, he was part of that Sarasota kind of scene. He's friends with Dickie Betts, and we were hanging a lot back then. And Chris had signed a record deal with Relativity, which was the label that Gov't Mule signed with in the beginning. Our friend Cliff Coltrane was signing all this great guitar music over there. They had signed Joe Satriani and Steve Vai and Adrian Legg and Our Lady Peace and Gov't Mule. And so Chris signed a deal over there and asked me to get together with him to write some songs. And so we wound up writing a couple of tunes together. Old Friend was one that I had started similar to the way Derek Trucks and I did it on the Allman Brothers record, which is stripped down acoustic. I'm playing drop D on the bottom, playing like a Delta slide sort of riff. And that song was mostly finished, and I played it for Chris, but he got the idea of doing it full band electric with a different sort of groove and a different sort of approach. And so the first recorded version of it was his version. And I think at the very end of it, we went into a little tease of the way that I had originally written it. So a few years later, when we were making the Allman Brothers record, Hitting the Note, I thought Derek and I should do this together in the way that Dickie Betts and Duane Allman did Little Martha, even though Little Martha was instrumental, or a song like Pony Boy that Dickie had written and done. So when he and I did it, we were sitting on opposite ends across from each other, playing through a stereo microphone, one microphone picking up both of us. I don't remember. Maybe I had a separate vocal mic. I guess I probably did, but that was it. It was just it was either one or two mics for that recording, and it really turned out great. It was all just live with me singing while we were playing, and then we did that version later at the Beacon upstairs in one of the dressing rooms that they included on the Allman Brothers DVD. It was like a little, not an outtake, but a bonus feature. And that was exactly what it appeared to be. I think Kirk West, our tour manager, came up to me and said, do you guys want to maybe do a version of Old Friend in the dressing room or something? And we just went in and did it one take and was like, yeah, that was cool. And that kind of turned out to be the version that people know the most, I think. And it was just something that happened off the cuff like that, you know. It's cool because we're both playing slide, and he's playing in open E, and I'm playing in drop D. And our styles are completely different on slide, but complementary of each other. And we've done that sort of thing many times, you know, on stage with his band or with TTB or with me or with the Allman Brothers, where we just do some old Sun House song or something. There were times where we would do Preaching Blues or Death Letter or something, and I would just sing, and Derek would play slide. It would just be a momentary improv thing. We're making it up as we go along. But we played together so many times at this point, it's just kind of like drinking water. It's very, very natural.
I've always loved your slide playing. Do you have some advice to maybe some guitar players who have never tried slide? Just something, a mentality. It's a different mentality going into slide playing.
Well, it's not for the faint at heart in the beginning. I always compare it to like learning violin. In the beginning, it's going to be pretty painful, the pitch and the sound. Since there are no frets, you're creating your own intonation. So that's really the most scary thing about it. My two biggest pieces of advice, I think, would be learn the right hand muting technique, picking with your fingers and instead of using a pick. I only use a pick maybe 5% of the time when I'm playing slide. The rest of the time I'm playing with my fingers, and because there's a great right hand muting technique that you can learn that gets rid of all the additional noise that comes from playing slide guitar. There's some cool left hand techniques as well, and I have a slide guitar book out and a video out as well that people can learn that from. So learn the muting technique and play with your fingers would probably be the two biggest pieces of advice I could give. Also, in the very beginning, it's important to remember you play right on top of the fret, not in the middle of the fret. If you're in the middle of the fret, then you're flat. And that's weird to get used to because when you're playing fingerstyle, your finger's in the middle of the fret. But when you're playing slide, you got to be right on it to be in tune. And also to play with your slide bar as parallel as possible. It really needs to be straight up and down, otherwise your intonation suffers. Now, as you get better, there are things you can do where you slant the bar for different sounds and different like note selections and stuff. But the first thing, you have to learn how to play with the bar nice and straight and dig in.
So what's the rest of the year look like for you and into 2025? What do you have going on? Anything new with Gov't Mule or any of your other projects?
Gov't Mule is doing 3 shows at the end of the year, one in New Haven, Connecticut, and 2 nights at the Beacon Theater in New York. We've been doing New Year's shows at the Beacon for, I guess, over 20 years now. Next year is our 30th anniversary, and so we're kind of combing the vaults to see what cool studio stuff is available to put out. There's already some great stuff that we've procured that's going to come out, archival releases. And we're going to do some special shows for the anniversary next year. I'm also going to be touring some with my band behind Million Voices Whisper. And I also have a record coming out that's a live recording with the Asheville Symphony Orchestra that I recorded right before COVID, and we delayed it because it's kind of a retrospective. It covers like 30-something years of my career. There's Mule songs, Allman Brothers songs, Grateful Dead songs, songs from my solo records, and all done with a symphony. And the band was Oteil Burbridge on bass, John Medeski on keyboards, Jeff Sipe on drums, and Greg Osby on saxophone. My friend Edwin McCain and Jasmine Muhammad are singing background, but that record is going to come out next year. So I'm going to do some more shows with the symphony, which I'm really excited about. So I expect next year to be quite a busy year. This has been a busy year, but I have a little time off now and just starting to promote my new record and excited.
Across your entire career, you put a lot into your music. Is there a song that means the most to you personally?
That's a tough question. the song Soulshine that I wrote in like 1987 or something, I never thought of it as an Allman Brothers song until Gregg Allman decided that he thought we should do it when we were making Where It All Begins. And when I wrote it, it was referencing my dad, and it was just a simple little tune. I never thought people were going to connect to it the way they do, but so many people seem to connect to that song that it's developed a special place in my heart based on that. There are a lot of the songs that I wrote for the Allman Brothers that I feel that way about. Desdemona that I wrote with Gregg Allman, Oh Before My Time, End of the Line. A lot of those Allman Brothers songs, especially after the losing all those guys, J-Mo's the only original member now. I think there's a song that I wrote with Johnny Neal called Gambler's Roll that was on the Seven Turns album that was just meant to be, like Gregg singing it, Dickie playing guitar on it, the Allman Brothers performing it. When I heard us do that song for the first time, it just kind of gave me chills and still does. But there's so many, I've been fortunate. I wrote 25 songs for the Allman Brothers through the years, well over 100 Mule songs, but we could go on and on and on. There's a lot.
Well, we appreciate you putting all that music out into the world. It's meant so much to us over the years. So thank you for continuing to do what you do and inspiring us to pick up a guitar every day.
Thank you, man.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Pick up the new record. It's fantastic. And thank you so much, Warren.
Thank you, Justin.